I'm Claire Whitman. I'm 32. And last Tuesday morning, my husband Daniel died of a sudden heart attack. I keep repeating that sentence in my head like it might somehow start to make sense. Like it might become less surreal if I say it enough. But it doesn't. It hasn't. And I don't think it ever will. We were supposed to have decades left. Daniel and I met during sophomore year at the University of Washington. I was a confused economics major, barely scraping through my intro class, and he was the charismatic teaching assistant who stayed after lecture to help students understand depreciation curves and marginal utility. He made charts with smiley faces on the whiteboard, and he had this laugh. Open, loud, completely unbothered by whether anyone found his jokes funny. I did, though. Always. He walked me to the campus bus stop one rainy evening, offered me his umbrella, and the next day, he brought me coffee without asking how I take it, and got it exactly right. We dated all through undergrad. He proposed at graduation, right on stage, slipping a ring into the diploma case. We were 23, and thought we knew everything about love. Maybe we didn't, but we knew enough to be all in. Daniel got his MBA while I worked admin jobs and cheered him on from the sidelines. He landed a financial advisor role at a respected firm in Seattle, and within 5 years he was their most requested consultant. Not just because he was good with numbers, but because he actually cared. About people. About doing the right thing. I worked as an office manager at a small architecture firm. We lived in a modest but cozy house just outside the city. And for 5 long years we tried for a baby. We lost 2 pregnancies. IVF failed once. We were halfway through our adoption paperwork when I found out I was pregnant with Ava. The pregnancy was hard. I was on bed rest for weeks. But Daniel was all in, reading baby books aloud like bedtime stories, massaging my feet, even learning to braid hair before she was born. He cried harder than I did when Ava arrived, whispering her name like it was a prayer. "You're here," he said to her. "You're real." And then we were a family. For 8 beautiful years. Daniel made dinosaur-shaped pancakes on Saturdays. He coached Ava's soccer team even though he barely understood the rules, watching YouTube tutorials after she went to bed just to keep up. His calendar was color-coded with her activities: purple for school, green for games, yellow for doctor. Appointments. He never missed one. There were signs. He complained of chest tightness sometimes, shortness of breath. A doctor said it was stress, maybe borderline blood pressure. Told him to cut back on salt and work less. He promised he would. But he didn't. That morning was normal. Too normal. I was packing Ava's lunch, turkey sandwich, apple slices, her favorite dinosaur napkin. Daniel was flipping pancakes, humming some old Bon Jovi song. Ava danced barefoot in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, her hair sticking up in 5 different directions. He kissed my cheek. "Don't forget maple syrup today. The real stuff, not that corn syrup garbage." I rolled my eyes. "Yes, Daniel." He winked. "That's Mr. Daniel to you. Breakfast god." Then he left, just like any other Tuesday. At 10:47 a.m., my phone rang. Heather, Daniel's assistant, was sobbing. "Claire, it's Daniel. He collapsed at a client meeting. The ambulance just left. They're taking him to Swedish First Hill, my coffee. Mug shattered when it hit the floor. I don't even remember dropping it. I remember the drive. Speeding through red lights. Screaming prayers to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please, just let me get there. Please. But I didn't make it in time. They pronounced him dead at 11:23 a.m. Heart attack. Massive. Instantaneous. The nurse tried to sound reassuring when she said, "He didn't suffer." I wanted to scream. "He's gone." "What do you mean he didn't suffer?" His body was still warm. His face still peaceful. Like he might open his eyes and laugh at the bad joke this had to be. I kissed his forehead. You forgot the syrup, I whispered. That night, Ava clung to me in our bed, still wearing Daniel's t-shirt because it smelled like him. She asked if he'd be home in the morning. I told her no. She didn't cry at first, just stared at me, like she was waiting for the punchline. Then she crumbled. I want Daddy, she sobbed. Please, Mommy. Please get Daddy. There is nothing more excruciating than hearing your child cry for someone you can never bring back. I sat on the bathroom floor after she finally fell asleep, the door locked, and screamed into a towel until my throat burned. I couldn't breathe. The grief felt like drowning in cement. I needed my mother. I needed my father. So I called them. The phone rang 5 times before my mom picked up. I heard music in the background, laughter, voices. Claire, can I call you back? We're in the middle of Brooke's birthday dinner. I swallowed. Mom, Daniel's dead. He had a heart attack this morning. There was a pause, then a sigh. Oh, honey, that's terrible. But everyone's here. Brooke planned this for weeks. Can we come by tomorrow instead? I didn't answer. Because what could I say? What could possibly be said when your world falls apart and your own parents won't come? After that phone call with my mother, I stared at my screen for a long time. I expected the text to come through any minute. We're on our way. Hang tight. We love you. Something. Anything. Instead, nothing. Not a knock at the door. Not a follow-up. Not even a text. They stayed at Brooke's party. A catered dinner with music and cocktails and laughter, while I sat on the floor of my bathroom, clutching a crumpled towel soaked with tears, trying to figure out how to tell my 8-year-old that her father wasn't coming home. That night, Ava kept waking up every hour calling out for Daniel. Each time, I held her close, stroked her hair, whispered every memory I could summon of him, his goofy jokes, his pancake shapes, how he'd once built her a cardboard rocket ship just so they could go to the moon on a Tuesday. Around 2 a.m., she asked, "Will Daddy still come to my art show next week?" I closed my eyes. "No, baby, he won't." "Why not?" Her voice was small, like she already knew the answer and hated it. "Because Daddy's gone now." "But he promised," she whispered, her hands fisting the fabric of his shirt. "He pinky promised," and I broke all over again. The next morning, I made coffee. I couldn't drink and sat staring out the window, waiting. Maybe they'd show up now. Maybe sleep had cleared the fog of selfishness, and my parents would realize what this moment meant. Instead, my father called. Not to offer comfort. Not to ask about Ava. "Claire," he said, voice low and businesslike. "This is obviously a terrible situation, but have you had a chance to locate Daniel's life insurance policy?" I blinked, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" "Well, you have Ava to think about, and funeral costs. These things add up quickly. I thought you might appreciate a little guidance. Not, 'I'm so sorry.' Not, 'We're devastated for you.' Just paperwork and policies and numbers." They didn't show up that day or the next. They called once, briefly, to ask what time the service would be held and whether they should wear black, or if it was one of those celebration of life things with color. Like picking an outfit for brunch. The only ones who came, really, were Daniel's parents. Gerald and Martha drove 6 hours through the night after I called them. They arrived with overnight bags, grief hollowing out their faces, but their first words weren't about their own pain. "Where's Ava?" Martha asked, wrapping me in a hug so tight I nearly collapsed. "In her room," I whispered. "I'll sit with her." She didn't need me to say another word. She just climbed the stairs. Gerald stood quietly in the kitchen, hands folded. "We'll help you with arrangements. Don't worry about anything. I didn't realize how desperate I was for someone to take control of something until he said that. They stayed the entire week. Martha helped me pick out Daniel's suit. She held my hand at the funeral home when they asked if I wanted a closed casket. Gerald dealt with the endless forms and phone calls. They made meals, did the laundry, answered the door, shielded Ava from well-meaning people who didn't know what to say. When the day of the funeral came, Ava insisted on wearing the blue dress Daniel had always called her princess dress. I braided her hair the way he used to, one loose strand tucked behind her ear. We arrived early. Daniel's co-workers came, his college roommate, my boss, even Heather, his assistant, who sobbed through the entire service. My parents? They texted. 20 minutes before the ceremony, running late. Traffic is a nightmare. They showed up halfway through the first hymn, whispering apologies as they slid into the front pew. My mother's perfume was overpowering. My father looked annoyed that there were no reserved seats left up front. My sister Brooke wore sunglasses indoors. She was scrolling through her phone between readings. During the reception at our house afterward, they barely moved from the living room couch. My friends passed around sandwiches and drinks, while my own family acted like guests of honor. At one point, I heard my father near the kitchen, talking to my uncle. Daniel was on the partner track, right? The life insurance must be sizable. It took everything in me not to scream. Later that evening, after Ava had gone to sleep clutching Daniel's old flannel shirt, I found an envelope on the dining table with my parents' handwriting on it. Inside was a note. We need to talk. This affects the whole family. Come over on Sunday. Bring Ava. I stared at the words, the heavy implication, the casual tone. Not we want to check on you. Not we're worried. Just a summons. And something in my gut told me it wasn't going to be about grief. 2 weeks had passed since Daniel's funeral. 2 weeks of pretending to function, of answering texts with emojis and phrases like, "We're hanging in there," when the truth was that Ava cried herself to sleep almost every night. That I couldn't open Daniel's side of the closet without losing it. That I sometimes still reached for my phone to text him things he'd never read. People dropped off casseroles, sent sympathy cards. My neighbor Ruth brought over lasagna and offered to babysit any time. Daniel's coworkers set up a small scholarship fund in his name for Ava. And yet, from my own family, silence. Until a Saturday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ava was drawing quietly at the kitchen table, a mess of crayons and paper scattered around her like a soft hurricane. I opened the door and froze. My parents stood there in matching navy coats like they'd come from church. My mother's hair was shellacked into its usual perfect helmet, and my father held a grocery bag, like he thought a loaf of sourdough could fix the fact that they'd skipped our tragedy for a birthday party. "Claire," my mother said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "We thought we'd check in, see how you're doing." "You could have called," I said, stunned. "Well, we were in the area," my father added. "Thought we'd stop by." They entered like they still owned the place, like nothing had happened, like the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. "I'll make coffee," I muttered, more out of reflex than hospitality. Ava stayed in the kitchen, eyeing them cautiously from her stool. Once the mugs were passed around and we'd gone through the obligatory small talk, Ava's school, the weather, my mother's garden club, I felt the shift. My father leaned forward, resting his cup carefully on the coaster. His voice dropped to what he probably thought was a gentle, reasonable tone. "Claire, we wanted to talk to you about your situation." I raised an eyebrow. "My situation?" "Financially," my mother chimed in. "Now that Daniel's gone and you're, well, adjusting, it's important to think practically." I set my cup down. "I'm fine. Daniel planned well. We're taken care of." My father nodded slowly. "Yes, That's what we were hoping. Given his position at the firm, we assumed the life insurance policy was substantial. There it was. The word that hung in the air like a foul stench. Insurance. I'm sorry, I said, struggling to stay calm. Are you asking me how much Daniel's death paid out? We're not asking, my mother said quickly. We just wanted to have a conversation about what's fair. Fair, I echoed. Fair to who? Well, my father began, sitting up straighter. Your mother and I are nearing retirement. We've had some health expenses, and the market's been rough. We thought, considering the circumstances, you might consider helping the family. Helping the family, I repeated, hearing the disbelief rise in my own voice. Just a portion, he said. 50% perhaps. That would give us some security. I laughed. Actually laughed. 50%? We also thought Brooke could use some support, my mother added. You know she's been struggling as an artist. 15% would help her get back on her feet. My hands clenched on the edge of the table. So, let me make sure. I understand this. My husband dies suddenly. My daughter loses her father. I become a widow at 32. And now, 2 weeks later, you want to split his life insurance like it's a pot of gold? My father frowned. You're being emotional. I am emotional, I snapped, because I buried my husband while you were eating birthday cake and dancing to a cover band. That's not fair, my mother said stiffly. We had guests. Brooke had been planning that party for months. And Daniel, well, he had high blood pressure, didn't he? He should have taken better care of himself. I froze. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. You're blaming Daniel? I whispered. I'm saying it wasn't entirely unexpected, my father continued. You said he'd been having chest pains. These things don't happen in a vacuum. I stood up. My chair screeched backward. Get out! Claire, my mother gasped. Get out! My voice was shaking now, my vision swimming. How dare you come into my house and ask for his money? How dare you blame him for dying? He worked himself to the bone for this family. He made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He coached soccer, even though he hated sports. He was a better man than either of you will ever be. We raised you, my father barked, standing as well. We paid for your college. We helped with the down payment on this house. And I thanked you for every bit of it. But this? I waved my hand at them. This is not love. This is looting a grave. They were halfway to the door when Ava peeked into the room, wide-eyed and silent. Sweetheart, I said gently, kneeling beside her, trying to steady my voice. Can you go to your room for a minute? No, she said quietly. I heard Grandpa. He wants Daddy's money. My mother's face twisted. Ava, honey, is that why you didn't come when Daddy died? Ava asked, her voice trembling. Because of the party? Because of the money? Ava, I said, reaching for her, but she stepped back, her little jaw clenched. He said Daddy should have been more careful. But Daddy was careful. He just wanted to come home for my art show. And just like that, she started to cry. The kind of cry that doesn't make a sound, just shudders through her shoulders and cheeks and makes your heart feel like it's being torn in half. My mother looked like she might say something. But for once she didn't. They left, slamming the door behind them like they were the ones wounded. That night, Ava climbed into my lap with her drawing pad. I want to come with you next time, she whispered. Next time? When you go to their house, if they call us again. Why? I asked, brushing her hair back. Because I want to say something. I want them to hear me too. I looked at her, the same stubborn chin as her father, the same spark in her eyes. All right, I said softly. "You can come." But I had no idea what Ava planned to say, or how much it would change everything. Sunday arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the kind of heavy, pressing silence that makes your skin itch. I hadn't slept much. Neither had Ava. But she was calm, almost too calm, as she packed her little manila envelope into her backpack that morning. "You sure you want to come?" I asked her again, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other squeezing hers. She nodded. "I'm ready, Mom." We pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, once filled with Christmas mornings and scraped knee hugs. Today it looked smaller, colder, a place that had stopped being home a long time ago. My mother opened the door before we knocked. She wore pearls. My father stood behind her in a button-down shirt and slacks, like this was a business deal. "Claire," she said with forced warmth. "Ava, come in. Everyone's in the living room." Everyone. They'd gathered the whole extended family, my Uncle James, Aunt Rita, my dad's brother Terry, and his wife Barbara. Even Brooke, perched on the arm of the couch, phone in hand like she was bored already. It was a performance. They wanted witnesses. They thought it would pressure me to be polite, to be reasonable. They didn't know me anymore, and they certainly didn't know Ava. I stayed standing. Before anyone could launch into the speech I knew was coming, I said clearly, "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my daughter. She has a right to hear it." My mother frowned. "Claire, this isn't really appropriate. If it's not appropriate for her to hear, it's not appropriate for you to say," I replied. The room fell quiet. My father cleared his throat. "Let's get to the point then. We believe it's fair, given the support we've given you over the years, that a portion of Daniel's life insurance be distributed within the family." He handed me a typed sheet labeled suggested allocation. 50% to us, he continued, and 15 to Brooke. That leaves you 35, which is still more than enough for you and Ava. I didn't read the paper. I didn't need to. I looked at him instead, this man who used to lift me onto his shoulders when I was Ava's age, and saw a stranger. Before I could speak, Ava stepped forward, backpack in hand. "I have something too," she said softly. The room turned toward her. Brooke gave a little laugh. "Sweetheart, this is adult." "No," Ava interrupted, unzipping her bag. "This is about Daddy, so it's about me too." She pulled out her envelope and walked over to my father. "I made you something," she said, handing him the single sheet of paper. He looked confused as he unfolded it. Then his face went pale. It was a drawing, but not like her usual rainbows and animals. This one looked like an invoice. Across the top in her careful crayon handwriting it read, "Bill for real love and support. Comforting Mommy when Daddy died. $0. Not provided. Coming to the funeral. $0. Arrived late. Asking if I'm Laiswai." Okay, $0. Never asked. Being real grandparents. Priceless, but not paid. Total, 0 point. Thank you for nothing. Love, Ava. No one moved. The only sound was the paper crackling as my father held it. My mother's mouth fell open. Her eyes welled, but I couldn't tell if it was shame or the usual performance. "I heard you talk about Daddy's money at the funeral," Ava said, voice shaking but clear. "You didn't even ask about me. About Mommy. You just wanted what he left behind." "Ava, sweetie," my mother began. "No," Ava said, stepping back to my side. "You don't get to call me sweetie. Not after what you did." The silence that followed was heavier than any yelling could have been. Brooke looked like she wanted to crawl inside her purse. Uncle Terry stared at the floor. Aunt Barbara put a hand over her mouth. I folded the paper and placed it back in Ava's envelope. Then I looked at my parents. "Don't contact us," I said softly. "Unless it's to apologize. and mean it. I don't want flowers. I don't want letters. I don't want more suggested allocations. You have made your priorities very clear. My mother blinked rapidly. Claire, we're your parents. No, I said. You're people who used to be my parents. But parents don't show up 2 weeks after a funeral and ask for a payout. My father looked ready to argue, but he didn't. Maybe the invoice really had shaken something loose. Or maybe he just didn't know how to fight a child's truth. We left without another word. Ava didn't cry until we were halfway home. Then it all came spilling out. Anger, sadness, confusion. I didn't want to be mean, she sobbed into my shirt. I just wanted them to know. You weren't mean, I whispered, kissing the top of her head. You were brave. You stood up for Daddy. And for us. That night, after she'd fallen asleep in my bed again, curled tight like she'd shrink without him, I decided to finally go through Daniel's filing cabinet. I needed to feel him again, to see his neat handwriting, his organized tabs, his plans. Tucked between folders labeled mortgage and college fund, I found an envelope with my name on it, Daniel's handwriting. My hands began to shake. I opened it, slowly, the edges already soft from time. Inside was a letter, dated 3 months before he died. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, something went wrong. The doctor said my heart's fine, just stress. But I've had a feeling. Just in case. I want you to know a few things. I've updated everything. Insurance, retirement, Ava's trust. It all goes to you. No one else. I know your father's asked me for money before. Twice, actually. I said no. I know he'll come to you if I'm gone. Please don't let him get to Ava's future. That's hers. You protect her. I know you will. But more than that, I want you to live. To laugh again. One day, you gave me everything. I want you to give that light to yourself now. I love you. Always. Daniel. I sat there on the floor, letter pressed to my chest, heart aching with both love and fury. Daniel had known. He had tried to protect us, even from the grave. And now, it was my turn to finish what he started. I held Daniel's letter in both hands, reading it again under the soft yellow light of our bedroom. The words blurred, not from smudged ink, but from the tears that refused to stop. He'd written it 3 months before the heart attack, just after his last physical. The one he said was no big deal. He knew. Maybe not for certain, but he'd sensed something. And instead of burdening me with fear, he took quiet steps. Protective steps. I read it a third time, slower now. I know your father's asked me for money before. Twice, actually. I said no. I know he'll come to you if I'm gone. Please don't let him get to Ava's future. That's hers. Even in death, Daniel was still protecting us. Still trying to shield our daughter from the same family that raised me in a house where love always came with conditions. The next morning, I booked an appointment with Mr. Adler, Daniel's friend, and the lawyer who handled our estate planning. When I arrived at his office, I had the letter folded in my coat pocket and a copy of the insurance documents Daniel had so carefully filed. Claire, Mr. Adler said gently, as we sat down across from each other. I'm truly sorry again. Daniel was a rare one, sharp, but also deeply kind. I nodded, already blinking back tears. I found something, a letter. He mentioned my father, trying to get money before. Mr. Adler didn't look surprised. I remember, he said. Daniel was very intentional. He insisted we structure Ava's trust so it couldn't be accessed by anyone. Not even you. Except for education or medical emergencies, until she's 25. It's ironclad. He pulled up the digital copies and turned the screen toward me. He left everything else, insurance, investments, assets, to you. No secondary beneficiaries, no loopholes. Your parents have no legal grounds to claim anything. Relief hit me so fast I nearly exhaled a sob. I hadn't realized how much fear I'd been carrying, even after shutting the door on them. I blocked them, I admitted. After the envelope. The texts, the voicemails. They didn't stop. My mother said I was twisting Ava against them. My father called me ungrateful, said he'd reconsider our relationship if I didn't call back. Mr. Adler's expression hardened. You're under no obligation to tolerate harassment. If it escalates, we'll respond formally. But legally, you're in a very strong position. Daniel made sure of that. I left his office lighter and yet somehow heavier too. Because while Daniel's plan gave me security, it also confirmed the ugliness I'd always suspected but never wanted to face. That my parents had tried to exploit him while he was alive. That Daniel had kept it to himself to protect me. That night, I told Ava. Daddy wrote a letter, I said gently as we curled up on the couch, her head resting against my arm. He left us instructions, and he made sure we'd be safe. She looked up, eyes wide. Even after he was gone? I nodded. He was always thinking about us. Even when Grandpa was being mean? Yes, especially then. She thought about that in silence, then said, I hope I can be brave like him when I grow up. You already are, I whispered. Wish that had been the end of it. I wish the letter had sealed everything shut, tucked us into a cocoon of grief and healing. But my parents didn't know when to stop. 3 days later, Ruth texted me during my lunch break. Just saw your mom at the school. Everything okay? I froze. I called the school immediately, heart racing. The front office confirmed it. My mother had shown up unannounced at pickup, said she was there, just to see Ava. But when the staff asked for ID and checked the approved list of guardians, she wasn't on it. They asked her to leave. She did, but not before making a comment about how this was all Claire's fault. I arrived at the school within 15 minutes, Ava already waiting with her teacher inside. She seemed fine, quiet, but not shaken. Did Grandma talk to you? I asked as we drove home. She shook her head. I saw her through the window. I didn't want to go outside. Her voice was small. Too small. Good, I said, keeping my voice steady. You did the right thing. That night, I wrote an email to Mr. Adler summarizing everything that had happened. I asked him to send a formal notice, outlining that any attempts to contact me, or worse, show up at Ava's school, would be considered harassment and addressed through legal channels. It was a line I never thought I'd have to draw. But Daniel had drawn the first one. It was time I followed through. The next morning, I updated Ava's school pickup list. I included only 3 names: myself, Ruth, and Martha Whitman, Daniel's mother. No exceptions. We were done with Grace. We were done with explanations, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling they weren't finished. We met at Ava's favorite: ice cream shop, neutral ground, public, safe. 1 table by the window, 3 spoons, and a single line drawn in my mind that I wouldn't let them cross. My parents had sent another letter, handwritten this time. No demands, no ultimatums, just 3 simple paragraphs and a single request. We'd like to see Ava, just once, if she's willing. I hadn't planned to show it to her, but something about how carefully they worded it, how they didn't mention money or the past or even me, made me pause. So I asked. Ava, I said as we sat at the breakfast table one morning, they'd like to see you. Just for a little while. In public. With me there the whole time. No surprises. She stirred her cereal. Do you think they mean it this time? I hesitated. I don't know, but I'd never let anything bad happen to you. And you don't have to go. Ever. This is entirely your choice. She nodded slowly. I want to try. One time. Just to see. So we set the date for a Saturday afternoon. I arrived early, Ava's hand clasped in mine as we walked inside. My stomach was a tight knot of dread and distrust. She wore her pink sundress and a determined look on her face, older than her years. They were already seated, my parents, both dressed down for once. My mother had left the pearls at home, and my father looked like he hadn't rehearsed a lecture for the first time in his life. Hi, Ava, my mother said gently as we approached. You've grown so much. Ava nodded, slid into the booth, and looked at the menu like it was any other Saturday. We ordered. They didn't push. They didn't cry or guilt or prod. Just asked about school, her favorite books, if she still liked building forts out of blankets. They remembered things I hadn't expected them to. When the ice cream arrived, double scoop mint chip for Ava, plain vanilla for me, my father took out a small envelope. It's just a card, he said quickly, seeing me stiffen. A birthday. One. For next week. No money, just words. I took it, unopened, and set it beside me. They didn't flinch. Ava laughed once when my mother told a story about her own childhood dog knocking over a wedding cake. My father made a joke about old phones and rotary dials. And for half an hour, it was almost normal. When we stood to leave, Ava looked up at them and said, "Thank you for not making it weird." My mother smiled. "We're trying." And, for the first time in over a year, I believed she might mean it. We didn't make plans to meet again. I wanted to sit with the experience. So did Ava. But the next morning she said, "I think they're learning. Maybe Daddy's invoice helped." I smiled. Maybe it did. Spring turned to summer, and with it came the anniversary. 1 year since Daniel's death. We planned a memorial, nothing formal. Just a backyard gathering with music, food, and memories. Jonah flew in from Oregon. Gerald and Martha brought photo albums. Ruth brought her famous lemon bars. Ava made a display board titled Dad's Best Moments. She taped on photos of pancake breakfasts, a crumpled soccer ticket, the receipt from the camping trip where Daniel forgot the tent poles. People laughed, and cried, and held each other. Near the end of the evening, Jonah stood next to the grill and raised a glass. "To Daniel," he said, his voice steady but thick, who never met a spreadsheet he couldn't master and never skipped a bedtime story. Everyone murmured a soft, heartfelt, "To Daniel." I stood beside Ava, watching the twilight gather. Lanterns glowed in the trees. The scent of grilled corn and lavender floated in the air. "I think he would have liked this," I whispered. Ava nodded. He hated sad parties. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I miss him every day." "Me too," she said. "But I think the best way to remember him is to be kind, but strong, like he was." My throat caught. "You're right, baby. That's exactly it." After the guests left and the dishes were cleared, I sat alone on the back steps, a blanket around my shoulders. The night was still, stars pressing down through the quiet like a promise. I thought about everything Daniel had left behind, not just insurance and plans and posthumous instructions, but a blueprint for living. He hadn't just provided for us. He'd shown us how to carry on, in Ava's strength, in Jonah's loyalty, in the way Ruth left soup at the door during the worst nights without needing thanks, in Gerald and Martha's gentle, unwavering presence, even, maybe, in the slow, halting effort of my parents trying to rebuild something from the ashes they helped scatter. Daniel's love was still here, in how we chose to treat each other, in the boundaries we built, in the forgiveness we considered, even when it hurt. Ava came out, barefoot and sleepy, and sat beside me. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetie?" You know how they say people die but love doesn't? Yeah? I think that's real. She leaned her head on my shoulder. He may be gone, I said softly, brushing her hair back. But his love still teaches us how to live. And in that moment, under the stars and silence and the flicker of paper lanterns still swaying in the trees, I believed it with every piece of my heart.